Thabang, my brother, thank you so much for coming to see me and chat to me today. Really, really grateful that you've taken the time. I think it's fair to say you are one of the youngest executives in South Africa. I'm keen to understand, how you came about that. But before we get there, just give us a feel of who is Thabang.
Thank you for having me, Jabu. I'm not sure about in South Africa, but maybe in my industry. Well, Thabang is a young person from a small town called Middelburg in Mpumalanga, from a township called Mhluzi. I come from a single parent home, and I'm also an only child. So I spent the first 18 years of my life in that part of the world. And then, of course, I moved into a varsity, going to the University of Pretoria to do BCom Accounting Sciences. My journey really developed from there in terms of growing up and going into my first academic endeavor, shall we call it. Yeah.
Fantastic. And how was it growing up in Mpumalanga, that township you mentioned, being, a single child in a one-headed family?
I think it was interesting. It was an interesting place, but I think I quickly learned that I'm more of a big city person, because I remember, our school used to organize trips for open days at universities. And the first time we went to your Wits and your UJ and your Tux, I thought to myself, yeah, this is where I want to be. This is where I belong, because as much as I love my small town upbringing, I also think sometimes a small town can sometimes limit your perspective, right? Because you're literally limited to the four walls of the town that you're from. And the more you travel, the more you expand your perspectives, because you see more, you do more, you're stimulated by different environments. So as much as I loved it, I think I've been better off as a person with the travel experiences that I've had, and also moving out of home and going into a bigger city. Pretoria is not the biggest city, but it's a city nonetheless. And, the key thing is around how the perspective shifts when you move out, and that's been key for me around, it's a common theme in my life around how travel shifts perspective. And it has done so in a number of ways, yeah.
And where did you travel to?
Yeah, so I got my first travel experience when I was 17. I became a young ambassador for the Rotary Club. And I lived in Argentina for 6 months. And I also got the opportunity to travel to Brazil. And I was 17. I think I remember I just finished my grade 11. So the school accommodated me. I could finish my grade 11 in October when the exams were in November. Luckily, I was quite a fairly a healthy, achieving student. So they were able to do that for me. And I left, and then I also started matric about 4-6 weeks later.
Yeah.
So I was there towards the middle or the end of Feb. So that was an amazing experience, living in a country, again, new languages, new everything, right? They don't speak English, so at the time, Google Translate was one of our main ways of communicating.
Oh, wow.
Having to learn Spanish, which I did. I was fairly proficient, but it's more than 15 years now, and I'm less so. So that was my first experience living out of the country. And of course, I attended business school in Japan as well, where I got the opportunity to live in Japan, understanding the culture of the East, doing business in the East, living in the East. And all of it, is an experience, and it changes your perspective, and it shifts the way you view the world. You realize that the world is so much bigger than the construct that you have, that's driven by the environment that you live in, you know. So that's just two of my living abroad experiences. But I've been very lucky since 2012. I've traveled Africa. I've been in the Africa space quite a lot. So I think at the moment I've been to over 20 African countries, which has just been phenomenal, you know. From your Ghanas and your Senegals to Ethiopia and Kenya and Uganda and Mozambique and Mauritius, all over, you know. And yeah, travel is a key thing for me, and it's driven me to have a pretty broad perspective on the world and how people live and how people choose to be, you know. So yeah, that's just one of the themes in my life that I've enjoyed and that has helped me to become who I am. Yeah.
Sounds like you had a ball. I'm almost jealous. You know, your travel experience is quite broad. I'm keen to get some insights when you reflect back on Brazil or Argentina, or I think you mentioned Japan. What were some of the key learnings you would say you took from those, travels?
The key learnings, I think, really it was about diversity awareness, you know. People, not everyone lives the way that you and me live. And the fact that they don't live the way that you and me live doesn't mean they're wrong, you know. For example, in Argentina, it's quite common that you'll have teenagers drinking. Their parents will drive them to the club, right? And they know that they're going to drink, but they don't have a problem with alcoholism as a country. They don't have a problem with teenage pregnancy because they've removed the taboo and the stigma out of alcohol and normalized it, and thus that's the way they live. Whereas that would be unheard of in our society, to take a 14-year-old to a club where you know that alcohol is being served, et cetera, et cetera. So diversity awareness is important, and the fact that lifestyles are different. I think as well, the learnings were around self-sufficiency. It's when I learned that I can be self-sufficient. I can not just survive, but I can thrive in environments that are unfamiliar, and that there is love everywhere. Human beings, by their nature, most of the time, will show warmth, acceptance, and love towards people. And so it's given me a sense of belief in the human race, because I've seen it on multiple continents where people embrace you, you know. So just off top, those are some of the lessons that I think I've learned about humans and how we all need to live and let live, even if people choose options that we wouldn't default to take. Yeah. So that's the value. And of course, I've also learned that, you know, sometimes you can physically limit how big your life can become when you don't travel. You know, you have a lot of accomplished people, moneyed people. They don't go anywhere. They just go to Durban, you know. And you ask yourself, but why do you just go to Durban and Cape Town? Why don't you go to Knysna? Why don't you go to Rustenburg? Why don't you go to Tabazimbi, you know? Because people are limited and they default to what they've always had, whereas your perspective and your views differ when you allow yourself to be surprised by something different. So that's just a nutshell of what I can say about how travel has opened my mind. Once you start to travel Africa, it's a bug that bites you, and you learn. It humbles you in a way, and it also makes you realize the privilege that you have of coming from a middle-income country versus a low-income country, right? It humbles you because you realize the privilege that you have is so unique to where you come from, and it manifests differently in another country. But of course, I mean, there's also the typical stuff around appreciating people's cultures, understanding how they live and how they do business. More importantly, so for example, doing business in West Africa is quite different to the East Africa experience. You'll find your East Africans are more calm and little bit, I don't want to call it respectful, they're more timid and passive kind of way, whereas the Western side is similar to South Africans. We are in your face, we are not afraid to say what we want, what we expect, and we put it on the table straight up,
Yeah.
So I think those are some of the things that I appreciate. And of course, in a more cliche sense, you see the sights and the sounds and the art and the history of it all. But when you move past those shallow aspects that are evident, you see how people live and how they are and how they experience their lives and how they do business over time. And that, I think, is the more interesting story for me.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I think a number of people would love to have the opportunity to travel as much as you have. How did you manage to travel so broadly? Was it through work, personal?
So this is where I think my career has been very good to me. Work was the first catalyst. Before that, of course, my experiences in academics and culture and the Argentina experience. But in terms of the continent, it's mostly been work-based types of travel that have allowed me to see as many countries as I've seen. But I think what's important, and people forget this, and I used to remind my colleagues, and I say, we're so lucky to have these jobs that allow us to travel. Take time to enjoy, because, the cycle comes in, 7 o'clock or 7:30, the car picks you up from the hotel, you go to an office or a boardroom, you work till 5:30, car picks you up, at the hotel at 6, dinner is at 6:30, you're back at 10 p.m., right? That becomes the cycle sometimes when you travel. But one has to be deliberate about taking time to experience the place, and one can do those in a number of ways. So I always encourage people to smell the roses, as it were, when you travel, because there will come a time where you move out of that space and you'll think, I've been to Malawi so many times, I've been to Nairobi so many times, I've been to Accra, but I've never seen Accra. I've never went to a market. I've only been to the Santon of Accra, and that's where you have your dinners and stuff. But there's a more authentic experience you can have if you challenge yourself and allocate time to be able to have it. Yeah.
Across the African countries that you've traveled to, which one stood out for you and why?
So I think my first time in Ethiopia was beautiful. I think the narrative of the late 90s and around what Ethiopia would be, and what you experience when you get there is not the same. It's a beautiful place. The culture is so rich. As you may know, Ethiopia is the only, or one of the only, African countries that were never colonized, right, by any of the European or other areas. So when you read that history and how the unique religion that they have there and how it filters through, I think it's a beautiful, beautiful experience. I've only ever been in Addis, so I haven't been outside of the big city, but even that was something wonderful. The seat of the AU is there, etc., etc. And then one that was very, very special to me was Rwanda. Now, Rwanda is, it's an emotive place, right? Very, very emotive. And when you get there, you just appreciate, humanity in a lot of ways, and how we as humans always need to do better for each other. And so Rwanda was quite special. Those are the two I can say off top was special. But in terms of living somewhere, that's a different conversation on the continent. And there's quite a few towns that I said, if I had an opportunity, I would live there. So yeah.
Like which one?
I have a soft spot for Blantyre in Malawi. It's a cute little place, you know, and the people are so nice. Very, very good people, very warm, warm in the way that they do business, very respectful. And the town itself is very lush and green. It's got a lot of hills. It's a little bit like Kampala, you know, lots and lots of hills and that sort of thing, high elevations, you know. So it's also good for health if you walk, if you take time to walk. So,
Cool
so
stuff.
yeah.
Fantastic. As I mentioned, you're of course one of the youngest executives in the automotive sector. I'm curious to know, how did you choose that sector as, you know, one that you wanted to build your career in?
So I think firstly, I've always had a passion for cars. It sounds cliche because most young boys would say the same thing, right? So my passion for cars comes back to, so I was this young boy in Middelburg, and every month I used to save my allowance to buy Car Magazine. And I think it was about 20 or 30 Rand at the time. And we used to stack them in our room divider, because that's what you have when you're in a township. And I stacked them and I used to collect them every month, and I used to enjoy the pages, you know. I used to enjoy reading up about all these expensive cars and, this manufacturer just launched this and that. So that was my first interest, right? But it went from, it moved, it wasn't just I like cars. I took my money and invested in the love for that. And then over time, when I started in my career, I started at Eskom. Eskom was my first job as a graduate in training in the finance department. I always cheekily say Eskom is still the best company I've ever worked for, but I'll keep that for another discussion. And so when I moved out of Eskom, I moved into an environment, into two environments that were relatively short stints. And I realized today that the reason why they were short stint is because the universe was adjusting the puzzle so that I can end up at Toyota, which was my first automotive job that I stayed in close to 3 years. And in there, that's when I started to get a passion for, first for Africa, and then second for the vehicle market, automotive mobility, and that's how I transitioned. So that's a bit of a backstory, but I didn't actively pursue to say I want to work in the auto sector. But as you know, the cycle of the universe would have it, that young boy that used to collect car magazines now got them for free at work. The marketing team always has a couple of copies, and also got to entrench. I got to entrench myself across different brands that have different value propositions, and growing in my career and in my skill set. Particularly there. So that's my automotive story, and until today I'm quite I've been very, very blessed. I've had everything from a NP200 bakkie to a luxury German vehicle to an SUV and everything in between. So I've been very lucky to be able to experience vehicles in different ways.
Fantastic. At least I know who to talk to for my next car.
There are friends that can sort us out. There we go.
Awesome. Fantastic. So your first job in the automotive sector, what were you doing?
I was the first. I was a regional finance manager. Funny enough, I was the first non-CA to be appointed in that role. And you know, my manager at the time used to joke and say, I don't know how we let you slip in, because that's not what we told the agent, you know, of what we wanted. And from there, I learned that qualifications can get you a foot in the door, but your hunger and your drive is what can help you to secure, and not only secure, but to thrive in there. Because when you have hunger and drive, you feel it necessary and important to do more. all the time, right? So the job was a finance job. We were looking after, I think, 8 subsidiaries of Toyota at the time. So I was the group controller as well as a regional finance manager, doing audits all over Africa, internal audits all over Africa, and of course supporting month-end procedures and closing consolidations for those subs and reporting back into Japan. It was a wonderful job, in a sense that, you know, one of the values, the company values at the time that I always remember, they always used to say, challenge with passion.
Yeah.
That was the value. They expected us to speak up.
Wow.
And, you know, for me, that's kind of how my career has gone. I always take the opportunity to voice my perspective and my view in order for it to add value and depth and breadth to what we are doing. So that's what I used to do as a junior finance manager, regional finance manager at the time that they called us. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned your boss told you he doesn't know how to let you sneak in. I mean, you were not a CA, and it seems like people in that space were mainly CAs. But nonetheless, you've managed to do very well in your career. So there's clearly things that you did quite well that charted a path for you there. What were those things?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the best things that happened in my career is when I decided that I don't want to go in that direction in terms of my accounting career. I think what it did, it made me more creative. It made me think more deliberately about which opportunities I want to take and how I want to do my path. So what happened was I had 5 years plus of accounting and finance experience. I became a FM, so I could run a month end. I knew what was required of that. And then I took a stance that I'm actually going to change tact a little bit, and I went into strategy. I became a strategy manager at Nissan Motors South Africa because I always had this sense, even at varsity, my friends will tell you, I always felt that I'd probably be a better CEO than a CFO. And when that light bulb came on in my head, I realized I don't have to take that path that's going to lead me where I'm not going to be at my best, right? And how I realized that is because, I didn't care that much for the recons. I didn't care that much that the numbers had to be exact. So I'll always round off, whereas my friends that are better accountants than me, they care. They need it to be exactly what it is, So for me, what was important in terms of what stoked my career is you have to know yourself first. And knowing yourself involves knowing your strengths. Where are you in your element the most? Where do you feel most comfortable? Where do you feel like you can thrive, right? And this sounds very philosophical, but once you work that equation out in your head, you then have a basis for you to think about what can I do and where should I be in order to make me feel most alive, right? Most alive means adding value to personal development, career development, adding value to other people, contributing to common goals, and watching those unfold over time. And so for me, it all started with the knowledge of self and then starting to chart a path of that. Education, of course, is very important. Although I have 2 degrees in accounting and I am a top CIMA, but I also think that once you have the grounding of the education, you have to now decide what you want to do with it. And this is what I say to young people. So what is important is that once you've decided what you want to do with it, you have to put in the work to earn your credibility, get your skills, The respect of your peers becomes important the more senior you become. And also, in corporate, sometimes there is a temptation for young people to be in these how do we call it, groups, of colleagues, and you always discuss these certain things, and there's a lot of negativity around that. So I've always found myself not wanting to get involved because, I always joke and I say, this is not my grandfather's company.
Yeah.
And that mindset is so liberating because you realize you don't have to be entitled. Right? That statement around this is not my grandfather, because if it was my grandfather's company, then I'm entitled to everything. I don't have to work. People have to give me something and make things happen for me. My manager has to lie awake at night thinking about how to make Thabang better, right? That's what happens when it's your family business. Whereas when you realize that it's not, you come to the realization that you are in charge of the journey. And when you're in charge of the journey, you start to be more deliberate about the chapters that you decide to open and change over time. So a bit of a long answer, but that's my true and fundamental belief around a career path. In a nutshell, let me leave it there. Yeah.
No, that's beautiful. Obviously, you mentioned you were intentional.
Yes.
You didn't force yourself to go with the traditional routes. You identified where you felt you fit perfectly and naturally. And strategy was one of the roles you think, really paved the way for you.
Absolutely. So in a strategy space, what, I always say, I wouldn't be where I am if I didn't have the strategy job, right? I think now I understood better why, guys that come from your top tier strategy consulting companies can be there for 2 years, but be entrusted with roles with significant scope, because when your strategy, you are across the board, multifunctional, all the functions within the company have to make submissions to you. And there's, of course, the temptation that you can be a postbox or you can be a sponge and learn everything. So, when the HR director sends me his submission that we're preparing for the CEO, I'm as interested in that as when the manufacturing director sends, and the finance director, and the sales director, marketing director. And this is how you learn, by really being deliberate again around your personal development, right? And not just being content with a position, but how can I extract maximum value from my time there? And also, when you extract maximum value, you become a better professional, which then makes you to add value to the company even more, because now you've got broad knowledge, multifaceted, multifunction, and you're able to add value not just in your function, but across the board. So strategy is a fascinating place to learn and to grow. And of course, sometimes when you start out, you're in meetings with senior leaders, and a lot of the time you're a quiet participant, making your notes, understanding what needs to be changed on the decks for global submissions and the stuff. But if you are switched on, you learn quite a lot. And that sort of a role really gave me a springboard to accelerate my career quite exponentially thereafter. Yes,
For some people that hear strategy, strategy is a term that's overused sometimes.
It is.
And it can mean different things depending on the context. As far as your role was concerned, what were you doing in that function?
So strategy has different levels, right? You've got strategy at a corporate level, which speaks to how you compete in the marketplace to be better than your competitors, right? Then, of course, below, and that's at a corporate level. At a level below that, every company in their strategy documents will have the key objectives that they want to achieve, which is grow market share, grow revenue, be an employer of choice, be high on tech in terms of your manufacturing, improve relations with your stakeholders, unions, whatever your stakeholders are. And those are the objectives. But in order to have those objectives, you need functional strategies around that from a finance perspective, from a tech perspective, and. So it is overused, but if you understand the flow, so our role as strategy supports in organization is around coordinating strategy processes, right? This strategic planning, they call it. So we've got a 5-year plan, we are in year 1, what was the actual achievement versus the budget? How do we roll the strategy? Are there new strategy items that we want to add or remove? So, for example, COVID, for example, caused a lot of companies to change their digital strategies and their employee strategies and how they engage, right? And so if there's a fundamental shift in the market, then you have to change and adapt to that. Yeah. So and of course there's micro strategies within that. So if you're a sales director, you need a retail strategy. You need how a market development, how's your go-to going to happen, a pricing strategy.
Yeah.
So it's all about understanding where it fits in. So when you are in strategy, you get to see the whole gambit from corporate level, where your head office says, we need you to grow market share to X. Okay, how are we going to do that? Objectives. Okay, under these objectives, what are the activities or the micro strategies we're going to do in order to achieve that? Yeah.
Fantastic. You said you decided to choose not to pursue a CA.
Yes.
But rather went the CIMA route.
Yes.
How did you come to that decision, and what's the difference between the two?
Yeah, so for me, SEMA again happened on my own terms, which is something I'm very proud of. So there's a program that they run that's for MBAs, right, that come into the space. And they've got a selection process that you go through. They look at your experience, and you have to submit a lot of documentation to that regard. Once you're completed with that, they allow you to get into the program and do a condensed study program, and you attend a lot of courses, and then when you're ready, you can take some exams, and then that's how you gain your exemptions by virtue of your experience, and then you get your accreditation above that. I think the differences between CIMA and CA are well documented. It's just a different path that people take. But I'm fundamentally convinced that as much as designations matter, they are not the be-all, end-all, in a sense that you can do very well if you just decide that you want to be successful at what you do, right? And the entitlement, once it goes out, when you realize that I don't have to be entitled, I have to work, you can have a wonderful experience in whatever career path that you chose. So that's my view around that. Notwithstanding that, yes, it is very important to be appropriately qualified in a competitive environment that we have in the South African labor space. However, I always say the qualification is not going to solve all your problems, right? You still need to do a lot of work after you've done that. And if you're willing to do that work, you will do well for yourself, yeah.
Awesome. So in your strategy role, you mentioned you work with a lot of senior people. I would imagine all of them were executives at Swissit. What did you learn the most from that experience, from those people?
Phew, the boardrooms, the things you learn when you spend time around execs as a young professional. I think some lessons for me include you have to stand up for what you believe in. You shouldn't be put into a corner to just agree, because that's called groupthink, right? Because sometimes, you know, you also have to advocate for the right things. You know, sometimes it's easier to just go with the flow and more challenging to have a different view, right? So the executives that I respect the most are the ones that, despite the consensus view being this, you register your differing view. It doesn't mean it has to be taken, but you have to register it. That's one. The second thing I think that I learned is the amount of pressure that it takes to be in those hot seats. And now myself having risen to exec level, it's not fancy. It's fancy when people announce you and they say, you are Thabang, you're the executive responsible for rest of Africa business and business development for Isuzu Motors South Africa. But what it takes to the amount of pressure you're under to achieve when you're accountable for goals that are on the strategic pillars of the company, it's really quite something. And I've also, so that's the second point. And the third point is that, you know, the executives at the time that I respected the most were those that took leadership seriously, right? The fact that you're an executive means that if you want to be good at it, you have to be deliberate about leading, and leading is about people, right? So the value of people in supporting you to achieve the company goals is quite important as you move past. Another lesson I think that I've learned, number 4, is the value of peer relationships. Very, very important. They talk about the exco chemistry, right? The exco has to have chemistry. And the chemistry doesn't mean we always agree, we're all of the same mind. It means that we respect each other professionally, we understand each other's roles and what we have to be advocating for, and we're working towards a common goal, right? We build bridges, not walls, right? And that's very important, I think, when you're an executive. So those are just 4 points that I think are important that one needs to work with.
Yeah. Can we go deeper on that? So if you look at an executive role versus other roles, senior manager or junior roles, what have you discovered to be some of the key differences between being an executive and anything else in the organization?
That is such an important question, because I've spent the last 3 years in my first executive role trying to figure exactly that, you know. And I always say, what's the difference between the manager and the executive, right? So between myself and my team members. So one of the fundamental differences, I think, is that probably your work keeps you awake at night more than it does for them.
Yeah.
That happens a lot. So stress is part of what you sign up for. It comes with a paycheck, right? So that's the first point. The second thing, I think you have to have a high level of EQ. So EQ means you have to rise above yourself. Rise above yourself in colloquial language means get over yourself, okay? In a sense that sometimes you can have an incident with a team member where the default Thabang response would be to be annoyed by it. But if, because I've chosen consciously that I want to be a leader, I then choose a different approach, which is to be empathetic, which is to listen, which is to try and understand where people are coming from in terms of the things that they request. So EQ is quite important when you're an executive. The other thing that I think is very, very important is that you need to resist the temptation to rule by title. I am the boss, therefore, right? That's an old mindset that it works, but it's not the most effective. It's not the one that's going to get you the most buy-in from team members. and it won't inspire. That's a big thing for me, enforce versus inspire. I choose the latter. I want to inspire action. I want to inspire my team members. I want to create a stimulating environment for them to work in. Being a young executive, one of the challenges is your team members are sometimes as old as your parents. They have children that are as young as you or as old as you. And they've also professionally have been there, done that. So a key question mark for me, I thought to myself, how can I create an environment that can stimulate people that have been there, done that differently, and to keep them excited about what we are doing and what we want to achieve in the team that I'm leading. I think I got it right a lot of the time, much to their stress and consternation at times. However, I think when you look at currently the 3-year horizon, and you look back and you see the growth in people and how their perspective have shifted and how the default known knowns of the time have been shown to not have been knowns, right? It can be different. The as is can be different, So that's what I've learned. So that was a particularly challenging thing for me in my job.
Yeah.
How to keep those that have been there, done that, stimulated, interested, motivated, and inspired.
You've touched on a number of leadership issues. And I think people who are interested in leadership will agree that it's not always an easy task. Leadership requires a lot. Sometimes people have to make unpopular decisions, but that are necessary. And striking the balance between inspiring and forcing sometimes can be a challenge, especially when there are expectations to deliver. How did you manage to strike that balance? You mentioned you prefer the inspiring route. What did you do, given that it seemed to have worked?
Yeah, I think for me, I believe in transparency. You have to be honest with people and not insult their intelligence because you're the boss. So that's important. Being transparent and being authentic to them around what needs to be done, right? So for me, the first thing before I even get to my team members is my relationship with my boss, right? Part of our role as leaders is to filter some of the things that come from our principles so that we can do it in a way that keeps the team in the river, not on the banks of the river. So the first step before I get to my team is around engaging my boss, sharing my views if I have different views around what needs to be done, and finding that common ground before I get to the team. Remember earlier on, you asked me about what I respected at the time from the executives I used to work with, were those that were unafraid to say what they think and feel and the implications it's going to have on their people. So I want to be that to my team, not a person that just sits in a senior leadership team, and it's, you do this, you do that, or please run with this, and you just say yes. You haven't assessed and analyzed some of the factors that count. So, or if you do have to say yes, think of the way to implement in a way that's least disruptive to the team and least, in your face for the team. So part of our job sometimes is to take the punches on behalf of the team and shield them from the things that happen there. I think good leaders always do that. So, and sometimes it gets to a thing and says, guys, I know you don't like this. I probably share your view, but let's look at it from the perspective of the company. Let's support, that's part of EQ, right? Even if you have a differing view, you can still choose to support because the consensus view is that this is the direction we have to go. So the EQ is not just required from yourself as a leader,
Yeah.
but also from your team, right?
Yeah.
And we need to create environments for them to flex the muscle of EQ. And that happens when we have to do things that we don't necessarily believe are the way, you know?
Yeah. That's brilliant. I think IQ is, inherent. It's a gift for most people. EQ, in the main, one has to develop and go through that journey. How do we develop our EQ?
Well, I'm no expert on EQ, but I think in my career path, maybe because I've accelerated at this velocity, you learn quickly because when you're in those boardrooms, even when you're not a decision maker in them, when you're still coming up, you start to learn that, your big boy shoes have to be on here in order to do that. But I think empathy is important. It helps with EQ, and also rising above yourself. You have to rise above yourself when you have a strong view on something. But empathy is important because your boss is a human being. He also has pressures, he has fears, he has concerns, right? He has dreams as well. And when you look at him first as a human being, or her for that matter, as a human being, you start to develop empathy for what they do. And as a result, it helps you to be more emotionally intelligent around how you engage with them as and when issues come up. So it is a skill, I think, and it's a learned skill. I believe everyone can learn EQ if they deliberate about developing it. All right. So it's all about being deliberate. You learn what you want to learn, what you find interest in, and if you challenge yourself, I think you can really make headway. So I've had to learn it by default because the roles that I've in my career experience have forced me to be more mature than the average of what my age would have been at the time. And it's a daily thing you have to practice. Yeah.
So as an executive for Rest of Africa business at Isuzu, I mean, that sounds like a big responsibility. What exactly does it entail? What must you deliver?
Yeah, so the first, of course, delivery is a market share and volume growth. That's important. Why it's important for us as Isuzu at the moment is because we're a challenger brand. So it's like a good opposition politics. You have to challenge, at all times. So that's one. It involves managing the profit and loss. We make it's multi-billion business unit, so it's important that we manage our profitability more than our revenue, especially in this time with volatile forex movements and the like. It's quite important. I'm in charge of the marketing strategy and the brand strategy for the market. So I've got teams that support me on the sales side, on the marketing side, around how we position the brand as a challenger brand. And then, of course, the relationship management is quite important. We've got a number of investors on the African continent, dealers, we call them, that invest in the brand and represent us in country A, B, or C. And so my role is to engage them on investor level issues around further investment required, product launches, their concerns. They call me when they need pricing in order to attack. It's for us to decide how we're going to position the brand and our products in the market in order to be competitive. It also involves market expansion. So new territories, new markets. So, for example, we've just launched Djibouti, which is a small country right above Somalia and next to Ethiopia. So it's a broad-based role, running a business unit on the business side, sales and marketing, developing the market, and after sales, right? Client customer satisfaction and making sure our key customers. So we in the B2B and the B2G space, right? B2G is business to government and business to business. So you've got large clients with big budgets that buy from us. So every now and then you have to do those ceremonial things. I remember in my first week on the job, my boss asks me to go to Zimbabwe 2 days. I started on a Tuesday, and Thursday we were on a flight to Zimbabwe to meet the Minister of Trade and Industry, for example, for a project we were doing there. So some of those stakeholder relations. I think the funny part was, the minister and I were the youngest people in the room. So he joked and he said, you can be comfortable because me and you are a similar age. I think the minister was also under 40 at the time. Yeah. And so that's part of the relationship management sometimes on certain stakeholders and making sure that the brand grows. We grow our volume, our volume, our market share, and we do that profitably. That becomes important here. And of course, leading the team and making sure that we engage in good projects that can create value for our customers and our dealers in the market space. Yeah.
One of the things that a number of young professionals that accelerate in their careers face up with is the imposter syndrome, the feeling of, am I worthy of this? Should I be here? Am I capable? Have you faced up with that? If not, how have you managed not to?
Yeah, I think for me, as I said, I don't have that problem of imposter syndrome because I know that I work hard. I know that my contribution is valuable. I also, it's part of the EQ for me that comes in where you have to know that you are good enough, that you are worthy. Yeah. That especially if you've worked for what you have, if you've been done no favors, right? So for me, there's confidence that comes from having previously been successful, because success breeds success. There's confidence in the fact that you have been done no favors at any point. I always joke sometimes and I say, I am here after the company has undertaken a long and rigorous recruitment process, meaning they had many other options of candidates to choose, and they chose me, okay? Yeah. So which means that they have assessed and convinced themselves that I'm the right person to be here. So how dare I be an imposter? It means I'm questioning their judgment as well. So I think the imposter syndrome, you have to be good at your job. That's a basic thing. Competence breeds confidence. I always say that. So the better you are at your job, the less the imposter syndrome comes. The second thing I think as well is when you are the new one, the different one, the female, the black one, whatever your diversity point is that makes you different from there, you will feel less of as an imposter when you create opportunities for others to join there. So if you're the only female in the boardroom and you feel that you're an imposter because of that, how are you going to open that up so that there's another female there, and at least then you're not an imposter? There's two of you at the table, literally, right? So for me, I've been lucky that part of my growth journey, personal growth journey, has been around me developing my EQ, and my EQ has led me to believe that I am worthy, I am good enough. I have been done no favors to be here, and therefore I can be, right? And when I decide that I can be, I vibrate at the highest frequency, right? Because I am complete. I read a beautiful quote that said, "You are not just one drop in an ocean, you are an ocean in a drop. You are complete." And once you understand that you are complete, you walk in the world with that sense of confidence that comes from knowing who you are. So unfortunately, I have not, or maybe fortunately, I don't have imposter syndrome because I am perfectly good enough and I am worthy. Yeah. And I believe that. And I walk around that way. And my those that know me will tell you, right? Yeah.
And it's very clear your EQ level, is very solid. The fact that you've been able to accelerate in your career to get where you are right now speaks a lot about your developmental path that you've had to walk through. I know you've got an MBA, as you mentioned, you've got a CIMA. What are some of the other things that you think you've done that have helped you develop? Things that you do intentionally, maybe, that this feed my development process?
I think I find a lot of value in giving of myself, of my time, of my skills, my expertise, and my knowledge. I find that the more I give, the better I become as a human being, and the better human being I am, the better I can be in my career path. Maya Angelou says, I think it was her, who says, at our best, we are all teachers. And when you are deliberate about teaching is about giving, right? You're giving your knowledge, but you're also giving of yourself, right? Every day. So I think that's important to me. And in terms of the other things that I think I do is you have to have the right company. People that stimulate you to want to do better and be better. Your friend groups, your peer groups, your colleague groups, even in your family, because people are anchored by their past experiences, their disappointments, their shortcomings, etc., they may project to you what you can't do. But when you start to believe in yourself, you can show them that you can,
Yeah.
So I think for me, you have to be mindful of your space, be protective of the energy that you keep around you, keep people that are positive, fun, thought-provoking, inspiring, and let that be your circle, because it cultivates you to become that, and you vibrate at that frequency, as you move forward. So for me, those are just the two things that I can mention. The company matters that you keep here, and it's not from a perspective of the contra to that is someone can say, oh, it means you want to exclude people, or you may have an elevated sense of who you are. I don't think it's that. I think it's about being intentional and selective about the things that you allow into your life and into your space. And when you do that, you find that energy attracts like, which is not what physics says, but like attracts like. So I believe that. So keep the right people around you, give of yourself, and also constantly challenge yourself to develop your EQ. You have to be very, very mature. And even when you feel like you don't want to be, you have to beat yourself into submission to take the difficult path of being more emotionally intelligent.
Brilliant. As we draw to a close, I have to ask you this. Can you say something for us in Spanish?
If I want to say, my name is Thabang Mahlangu. So, for example, in Spanish, if I wanted to say my name is Thabang Mahlangu, I would say, mi nombre es Thabang Mahlangu, or soy Thabang. It means I am Thabang. And then if you go into Japanese, I'm trying to think again. I've forgotten.
Yeah.
I've hit a blank.
Spanish is fine.
It's fine.
That was beautiful.
Yeah,
that was beautiful.
Yeah.
My last question to you.
Yes.
What is your next big step?
I'm not sure about whether it's a next big step. It's big, but I've decided to challenge myself and move into a different career path. I'm moving into a banking environment shortly, where I'll be leading the efforts of my new employer in the automotive sector.
Yeah.
So I think that continuity from a sector perspective is good, but it's also challenging me to get into a new industry, a new environment. And I think that's what the 21st century world of work is about. Smart professionals should always be ready for change and ready to change, right? Challenging yourself, They say we should all be starting new careers at 50, at 60, just being open-minded to that, either new careers, new businesses, etc., etc. So I've decided to challenge myself with that. I think when you finish business school, sometimes you do get that itch to think you want to change industries. My itch it will only be satisfied close to 4 years on, but I think it is the right time after 10 years in pure autos, moving somewhere, maybe at a different part of the value chain, which is financing and that sort of thing. So that's my next move, and I'm quite excited about it. Yeah.
Awesome. Congratulations for that. And I must say thank you so much again, Thabang, for taking your time to chat to us today. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Jabba. Appreciated our chat.